Matt.
How's it going?
Going good. Working. I had to work at home today to get my taxes finished to get over to my guy today.
Yeah, my new money girl CPA is my daughter-in-law. Stepdaughter is CPA. She's doing my taxes this year. She I was going to declare my mother as a dependent. She said, "Big problem. Your mother made $3,000 too much money to take her as a dependent." And she found a loophole. She said, "Well, that's only happens if she's over 59. Then I can get to keep her." But that was going to be a nasty little bite.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm just going through all my stuff right now, getting it done so I can get it over to my guy today.
It's got to be an easier way to do that.
Yeah, well, there is. I literally send it to him, but I like sitting down with him and talking to him, so he can charge me more.
Oh yeah.
But he's a good dude. I like talking.
He probably doesn't mind that at all, does he?
No, it's always at the end of it. I'm like, "What do I owe you?" And he tells me, I'm like, oh, "Okay." But hey, they only get to do that once a year, right?
I had an attorney buddy that I'd call him up and say, "Hey, will you call me back?" And he would bill me when I would call him and leave him a phone message.
Yeah, yep. They do that in the software industry too. Did you know that? They actually bill you. They actually bill you when they talk about you, and you're not even there. Blake, get that? You know.
That seems fair. Like, how do you prove it?
Craig was asking if he's muted. Yeah, he's mute. You're muted, Craig. So we can't hear you. He said, "I'm in a lumberyard with forklifts, beefing and stuff. Don't want to disturb whatever's going on."
Yeah, watch your step, buddy. Just look where you're going.
Yeah, we cannot hear things. So hopefully you can hear us okay. So I wanted to first of all, everybody, welcome to Lunch with Lumbermen. Matt Layman's Lumber Guide, Ashley Buckle Materials Exchange. We talk about the weekly wrap up of what happened in lumber last week at OSB, plywood, and what we see going on this week. So I'll kick it off, Matt. I got to sit in on your second class, so to speak, this week. It seemed pretty cool. Good group of people. You do your best to pull information out of them. It's hard to get people to talk sometimes.
I swear I don't know these are. You don't want to say you guys are the type A personalities in the lumber business, and they just.
You know what's funny? I wanted to say stuff a bunch of times, but I kind of like you kind of get your gumption up to do it, then you get a little nervous, right? But
yeah, when you stepped in, it was like a firecracker went off. It's just like bam, there's somebody said something.
Well, no doubt. Well, let's talk about a little bit first about what we saw last week. Maybe just a brief bit about what you guys talked about. You're calling Jim Schumacher's on the call today.
Jim's flirting.
Jim was in the meeting too the other day. It was good.
Yeah,
to see
Jim's
him.
flirting.
Yes, yeah, it sounds great. So, we traded off last week. We started off the week before. Southern Pine I would say everybody was asking in that meeting what was getting a bite. Southern Pine, I know there's some brokers out there that accumulated some and bought some. I haven't seen a lot of follow through yet, but maybe I'm wrong on that. Spruce is the tale of hide the whatever you want to call it, because the three mills that produce all the spruce, everybody says they have a great order file. They're not doing anything. If I'm missing that. And OSB is trading off the Pacific Northwest. Those items, those guys are taking firms. Anything that has something to do with multifamily homes, 9-foot 2x4, 9-foot 2x6, had a bid in the market finally and moved some both in the East and in the West. OSB is still trying to find a level to trade at. What are you seeing out there, Matt?
I was thinking about 9-foot for a minute. Like, was it 2 weeks ago? 9-foot was off like $300, $400. You just couldn't give it away. And now all of a sudden it's popular. Just the thing that just makes no sense to me is how in the world a mill can justify $200 and $300 price cuts a week when you're getting no bids and no offers. It must be the relationship to what the price of the product is. But they're so willing to take that money off, but so it just makes you scared that that when they get a little bit of order file, they get a couple days of order file, they're going to be adding $200 back on it.
Well, that's 2 weeks ago when people were talking to mills, the business was great. It was never going down. I think it's just hard in this volatile type of market. Look at when you're sitting at the mill level, you always think it's going higher, right? I mean, that's just you're mentally plugged into that, and you kind of have to.
That's what you're trained to say anyway.
Yeah, and I get it, right? Because historically, what are mills? They're always long, right? They're traditional, natural long the market, and they've had a great 2 years. And they deserve it. But nines, it's hard to get all the feedback. So let's talk about nines. They traded at almost $1,500 east 2 weeks ago, and then they had a low trade. I don't know if it broke 4 digits, but I know guys were buying it at $1,000, right? And we're probably bounced off the low trade price that most people never see, but now you're starting to get a bite. But that is a big multifamily one. The one that you're really good at and have a good eye on, though, is the pine market. And I think what I've really learned about talking to you, and it finally resonates even more. Treaters really drive that market.
Yeah, they're 50%. They're 50% of it, and when they're out, it's doing nothing.
Yeah, think about that. They are almost 50% of the market. That is a huge chunk of southern yellow pine. And, one thing that we're seeing showing up a lot more, not just in spruce, but in pine now, are the higher grade stuff, the number one primes, the
MSR,
all that stuff. And that has me believing what you've been preaching for months, that these extra deck jobs and all that the people did are still, people are still building, but they're not like they were for the last 2 years. And these home centers aren't piling on the decking and the extra to top it off, and then top it off on top of the top off.
Yeah, it's getting busy this year. We talked about this last week. Last year, everybody built decks. This year, they're putting shrubbery around it.
Good point.
The mulch and shrubbery and plants are all over the place at Home Depot and Lowe's, and it's ridiculous the amount of mulch that those guys that have. But their treated lumber inventories are. I mean, they've got some, but they don't have anywhere near they had when they were bloated last summer. And I talked to a guy who sells a lot to Lowe's, and he just said this week they were in now, and next week are going to be make or break it for Lowe's and Home Depot. If they don't turn around this week and next week and do significantly better than they did in March, then they're going to have to revise their whole expectation for the year, and it's going to be down.
But I've talked to a bunch of people that sell them too, and they're not shipping them like they were last year. I mean, in some cases, maybe there's always natural takeout on certain items. But as far as treated goes, it sounds like it's
But they were stupid buying it last year, though. I mean, they were just, irrationally buying. Not stupid. I don't call them stupid, but irrationally buying it based on what had happened the year before, getting caught short, and they got the whiplash going in both ways. And now I think they're positioned pretty well for probably adequate for what they have. There's no reason to go back and expect the treaters are going to come back and pounce on this market, buy a bunch more. And, I think in the pine market, we're probably going to get April, May, and June are our best consumption markets for that months for that product, and probably for the entire industry. So here we are, April, and it's not setting as the market still seems to be a little bit soft, but we are right on that FDP week of week number 15, and the market's gotten better. It's trying to make a turn, and if you're gonna play it for an up move, I think this is the week to do it. Stuff could get gone. We could even see prices drift a little bit lower, Ash, but when a lot of the availability just not be there. So if you're thinking you're going to buy all you want at the bottom of the market, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah. So, with what we've said about everything, there is still liquidity in the market. If somebody offers something cheaper than they should, it gets bought, if that makes sense. And when I say cheaper than when they should, every now and then we look at a price and you're like, I know on the exchange, we'll look at a price sometimes and I'll be like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'll call the seller and he'll be like, I want to move that. And sure enough, it moves because somebody else recognized the value delivered to them. So what I'm saying is, that's good that there's liquidity. The other thing that we're seeing is people still willing to lock in prices for Q3 and Q4 in some cases.
Yeah, at $1,000.
That's which is, to me, I'm like, I was talking to a guy this morning. I'm like, I still see people they'll lock in at a discount because the way that the curve is set up in the futures market and for the people that forward sell people, it allows them to give certain discounts. But these discounts are still, some of them are in the 4 digits on some stuff.
But the builders said from the beginning of the year, we heard it from several people that said, like, you could lock me in at $1,000 on everything for the entire year. I'll take it. I'll take it right now. Nobody wanted to touch it.
Yeah.
And probably a good thing they didn't for the first quarter, but that might not be a bad order for the next 3 quarters.
Well, if you think about it, so there's a lot of people. One person that we know in the Midwest here, he's a typical big framer that never used to buy his own lumber, but in the last 2 years he started to, right? So a lot of different people are making different decisions. He locked in the rest of the year. He was saying at a high number, but it's okay because he's got a profit in it, right? So
yeah, he didn't care.
So not everybody's like this. Like we talked yesterday if you're a retail lumber yard selling to big home builders, you're probably more in a 30-day cycle to them. So it's hard to do that with them. But when you're talking to framers and multifamily people farther down the chain that have stepped in and started buying now, they're willing to do it. And in some cases, the profits they're locking in because of the volatility of the market could be $200, $1,000 sometimes.
Easily.
There's no opportunity very often in this business that I've been in to ever do that. So
yeah, this is kind of between now and the second week of May is probably the most difficult time to give advice for buying and selling, because you really want to tell everybody, don't buy anything. Whatever you do, don't lock in numbers for long-term numbers around the 1st of May. It's just historically a bad time to do it, but you don't want to scare the buyers off, the people that were advising to buy lumber to have some inventory. So it's kind of a catch-22 type thing, but it's just May's historically it's just a tough month. I still hear people they're afraid of running out of lumber, so they're still buying and pay the numbers. The numbers are much better, but nobody's willing to put in a whole lot of extra product.
Yeah, well, no, and a lot of product is still caught in that whole distribution debacle that's starting to get cleaned up. I mean, a lot of people had their inventory built, except it was sitting at the mills or in transit, right?
Right.
So, and they were backfilling a lot of that. But I guess my point is, to me, when people are still willing to lock in at 4-digit numbers for 3rd and 4th quarter, I look at how bad, we talked about in your call the other day, you had that whole list of all the garbage that we know is going on in the world and how it weighs on our mind. Inflation, Ukraine. I'll have to say inflation again because it's double digits, so I'll say it twice.
Yeah.
All the potential recession coming up, all this printed money we have sloshing around in the system, yet things are never as bad as they seem or as good as they seem. I think we still are slogging it out. And Riley had a good point. He goes, at some point before this cycle is over, we're going to build 2 million homes. Now, he doesn't know whether that's 2024 or whatever, but if we can ever get up demand. Now we may go down a little bit before then and take some of the froth out of this market. What do you think of that, Matt?
Well, we could do it. It's just a function of getting the people together and the products to do it. The demand is clearly there. It's just that the industry has just been, it hasn't needed to meet that demand for such a long time that we're just not geared up to do it. I mean, we don't have the kind of lumber production or sinks and bathtubs or dishwashers or anything else, or labor or concrete. Land's getting scarce and expensive, and I think we just got a spot where things just need to cool off a little bit. It's almost like halftime. Just take a little break, go get a Gatorade, and come back and hit it again. But I was talking to you about this consumer sentiment index thing, and I noticed that I was looking at it. Is 59.4 was the lowest that it's been in 11 years. And then just today, the new consumer sentiment came out and is back up to like 64. It bounced back up. So people from last month to this month have gotten more positive feeling about the economy and the war and all that kind of stuff. I think we're thinking things are going to work out better than they could if they were the worst case scenario. But
Yeah, no doubt about that. One of the things too, there's a lot of things that we don't know what's going to happen, and life has a funny way, a humorous way of always settling things out, and there's interesting things happening. I mean, one of the things that we have in this cycle we didn't have in that last run up in 2004, 5, 6. There weren't as many commercial buyers of homes or investors.
Right.
Think about these investors now. The individual person still is the biggest buyer of single family homes, but there are more investors coming in. I've just read the articles in the Journal and everywhere else in Barron's over the last few weeks, how these investors are still willing to pick off these 1-2 whole subdivisions of homes when home builders want to move them. And
Right.
if you're a home builder, isn't that a lot easier to sell to people like that?
Absolutely. You don't even have to go. You have to sell it. You don't have to pay anybody to do it.
Yeah.
I heard this morning also that the multifamily is going to get is still in favor because rents on multifamily are still considered to be inexpensive compared to home ownership. But that doesn't mean it's cheap. It just gives you a reason to be bullish. But still, I think I was thinking before we just got on about where do you think 90% of the population gets their news from?
Well,
CNN or Fox. It's going to be one of the two, probably.
I saw a whole poll on that, and what demographic or political one looks at each one of them, right? And
Right.
Yeah, CNN, Fox, CNBC. But you know where they get most of their stuff now from?
Twitter.
Yeah. So they were saying the Fox, CNN, and MSNBC shows would be low ratings on a good Twitter or blogger.
Yeah.
Look at shows like us. People go and get information, right? Because
Yeah. But I was thinking like the people that MSNBC and Fox and CNN, those are all people that are looking for extreme views of either far left or far right kind of views. And I think those are the people where they kind of drive consumer sentiment of either you're really positive or really negative, and depending on what's going on at the moment. And we for the last couple of weeks, you think about it, we haven't really had any other than just seeing bodies laid in the street in Ukraine. It's almost calmed down a little bit. It's like it's not big news anymore. Like one lady said, I saw an interview last night. Said what they're worried about is the Americans are going to go back to their settled life of comfort and ease and just forget about us. And we're going to get slaughtered here 1,000 people a day, and Putin's going to run wild, and somebody's got to step up and chop him off.
Well, I'm glad everybody gets some of their lumber information here. We were talking. I saw you and Jory and I going back about the. All right, I asked people what their order file or what their sales order file was. Glenn, is it Daigle? Said 4 weeks right now, and I'm looking at buying more if the price is right to take me out to 6 weeks. That's pretty cool, Glenn. Great feedback.
Good strategy.
Yeah, that is a good strategy, I think, right? Especially if you got the business sold in most cases.
Well, and I think also if you're expecting the market to rise, my recommendation to our group the other day was buy 8 weeks worth. One guy said, you talk about 8 weeks shipment, 8 weeks delivery, because if you try to buy some can for West Fraser wood today, you're going to be 8 weeks shipment possibly. So, but no, I'm talking about wood that you can have on the ground in 8 weeks, and the idea is that you look for prices to probably run up a few weeks and then run down for a few weeks. You get a chance to buy it cheaper on the backside and just avoid trying to purchase some things the first couple of weeks of May.
Jeff Dill said he's selling this morning July arrival imported panels up in the Northeast. Great point. So it's people are willing to buy farther out in their traditional cycles. I think part of it's because one, they got business, but two, they want to make sure if there's any type of these logistical issues, they're getting in front of it so they can just keep stuff coming in a steady stream, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it makes a big difference when you're down 25 or 30% when you're making those decisions too in a month. It's a little bit easier to make the decision, but still, doesn't it feel like that people are just still, even though you get prices down $300, $400, $500, people are still apprehensive about. Somebody said, well, if it's $1,000 this week and it was $1,200 last week, is it going to be $800 next week? And you just gotta at some point you got to start feathering in some of these lower prices to get your inventory lower and play the game. But Now's a better time than 2 or 3 weeks from now.
I think that's probably a good call. And what we've seen on the platform is more bids coming in. I mean, when we did that thing last week, Matt, and if I wasn't at home, I'd do it today, where we showed people how to bid on pine. We moved a lot of trucks of pine. So
did you?
Yeah. So
good.
A lot of that is just people pinging them and showing them how to do it, right, and getting them comfortable with doing it.
Yeah, I wonder. After we did that, I wonder if it would be a good idea how many people would be interested in fitting in on a session if you had like 2 o'clock every day or 1 o'clock every day, so just sometime, or 10 o'clock in the morning when everybody sat in, and you have like a coaching session and people just say like, what do you think I should bid on this or something, just almost like a little
look at
open forum.
One of the reasons why people use the traditional methods of buying right now is because they don't know the market. A lot of times they don't know it as well, and they want somebody else to lean on to tell them that this is good and this is what I just sold to somebody else 100 minutes ago, and if you don't buy this, the next person is buying it. That's why we have the traditional method set up now. And all Materials Exchange does is give people the best bid to look at and offer to look at to them, so they can help make that decision digitally sometimes, and have a digital broker to lean on, so to speak, or a digital.
I was thinking there's Peter's asking these guys, you think it'll be a bigger downturn will hit the market late June or July like it has traditionally? I think the biggest, there's going to be a downturn between now and then, but I think the surprise is going to be the market's going to be underbought in the summer. I think because it's not getting really overbought right now, we're probably going to have a little better bounce in the summer than we normally do in June or July, but it's still just going to be a little pop to fill in and then fall back off in August. But I was thinking about how we were talking about the people in the class the other day, how nobody wants to say anything, and I was thinking about you guys. Ash and I are perfectly good examples of don't be afraid to say something and look foolish when you do, because you won't look any more foolish than we do. So
we're trying to make a living out of it.
There's no wrong answers and no stupid questions. If you've got a question, you can be guaranteed that there's a handful of other people just sitting there waiting to type it and ask it, but they just don't want to be the one to do it. So everybody's welcome to make a comment. They're all considered to be classy.
Yeah. Peter was asking about the downturn in the market late June or July. But I don't know. There's so many unknowns going into June or July. One thing that I've noticed over the last year or two, and we've talked about it on this show, I've noticed more places with non-traditional people keeping inventories. So It's almost like the statistic of how much gas is out there. Well, when they look at people's gas tanks sitting in their driveways, that's a lot. I think there's a lot more facilities for people to, and different people that are storing lumber longer that traditionally didn't. So any downturn sometimes that people have business sold out, they load up on stuff. What I've seen.
It's one of my groupies, Steve Val.
Oh, Steve, panels. Your thoughts out there if there's still room to the downside? Well, I mean, one thing I can say, Steve, is I got a text before this from a guy that said, "Hey, can you slide 2 cars of OSB in somewhere at this price?" And it was below the market. So that's already going on out there, where the friends of mills are talking and trying to, so the market's well under print at this point, and it has been for 2 weeks, right?
And if you think about the primary secondary supplier of OSB has been and probably still will be Home Depot, but right now they haven't had a chance to reduce their inventories because of the lower prices. But over the next several weeks, you could probably expect they're going to have lower prices to sell. Steve
is giving you a hard time for saying he was your groupie.
I know you may be stutter. So you might say something nasty, so be careful.
No, so I mean, look at OSB. There's 5 producers, basically. If they're even 5, they sell to Home Depot and Lowe's as their big ones, and then they have their other group of people they like to make stuff disappear into. After that, then they go looking for other people, right? And then that's got to be down to 5% or less of what they need to sell. So that's why that market trends up so fast. So it takes such a long time, and when it rolls over, it takes a while to roll over because
Yeah, if you think about it, if you got 80% of what you have sold on contract every week, you could go through that whole week and sell nothing and only lose 1 day of order file.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting dynamic in that market out there, right? But it eventually finds a level to trade at, and that is the biggest item that we trade on Materials Exchange. Is we've probably moved 400 or 500 trucks on here of that, and very few of those were from a mill. Those were all people reselling mill contracts, wholesalers that owned inventory and imported wood. Chad Epperson, inventory levels of 8 weeks, 2x4 through 2x10, 3 to 4 weeks of 2x12 timbers, 5/4 by 6.
Are you asking about timbers at 5/4 6? Because they've gotten the demand for those was kind of perky a couple of weeks ago, but they just, because of the absence of treaters. Chad's a treater also, but the timbers at 5/4 by 6 looks like they've come off probably a couple $100 this week. So I think just from a timing perspective, you kind of got to, if you need it, you don't want to be out of it, because if there's anything that's going to move this summer, it's going to be decking. Because there's still people that didn't do decks, and I've got this cycle theory with decks is 5 years old, they're in trouble. 10 years old, they need to be replaced. They're a liability when you try to sell a house. If you've got a deck on the back of your house, if you don't do something with it every year to keep it nice and secure, and if the boards are nailed down, they're popping up. If you haven't screwed them down, and if you don't have some weather treatment on it, then it's going to start looking crappy. So it takes a lot of maintenance, and most people don't do that with their decks. They just build them and wait for them to start getting splinters in their feet.
That's true. Hey, you were talking about the big reveal. Was that something you wanted to show, or?
Well, that's the consumer confidence.
Gotcha. Okay.
The Michigan University Consumer Confidence or Sentiment thing is if you look back and the point of the thing was that, I mean, I've been looking at this thing for years, and I looked at it and I go, wait a minute, they got data back to 1952. If you look under that summary section there, you can just scroll down the summary tab at the top, and you scroll down, you can see that it's been the lowest that it's been in the whole. See there you can see the bump from 59 to 65, and from March to April. So the April numbers came out in the middle of April. So, and that's kind of, to me, that's a little stunning that out of everything that's going on with the economy, the inflation, and the war and COVID again, that despite that, people are feeling more optimistic. That's we got to be aware of that. I mean, don't think that that makes me think that the market could be getting underbought by just thinking that there's just a lot of negativity and people are not going to do anything. But that little indication right there says, well, don't be so sure, because we're still out here and we're feeling pretty good about it. And that's
that's the big thing. I was thinking that weird spidey sense I had the last few weeks. I was getting so negative on stuff, and I was in the whole herd with everybody, that there has to be something out there that we're missing. People still want to live in homes, and people still want to buy homes right now. From my feeling is, right.
Yeah, and really the only people that are really getting priced out of the market, I think there's two groups. One is the entry level people who $500 a month really does make a difference, and the other people that are mover uppers that are just feeling like the market's toppy, and they could probably afford to do it. They just don't want to do it because they don't. If they can buy it $50,000 cheaper in another 6 months, then no rush.
Right. Yeah. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Anything you want to wrap it up with, Matt? It looks like we're up against our half an hour. I did want to say you should. I've sat in on Matt's calls with his intimate group of users, and I pulled a bunch out last week. I don't want to share too much, but one of your users, Matt, was talking about how traditionally they'd be selling a lot of pine right now for treated, and they weren't. And this was, and all of a sudden, kind of that's how I went back to what you were saying months ago, and I heard him say that who has boots on the ground, right? And I'm like, man, that you can triangulate stuff like that and figure out maybe there is something to this, right?
Yeah, but that's why my focus right now is really on consumer sentiment more than anything else, more than housing or whatever, because it's kind of telling you like I've been thinking that the market's it feels like we're underbuying the market. It feels like we're expecting something bad to happen and the worst to happen, and that there's going to be a nuke dropped in the backyard one day. But when we get to the extreme of even being under inventoried or over inventoried, market reacts in funky ways, and that you can tell for the last 3-4 weeks, the market has been underbought. Just because nothing else, just looking at price action, that tells you the market's being underbought. Inventory shifting back to the mills. So, and it's like a pendulum that swings, and as soon as it gets heavy on the mills, and the mills have been talking about curtailments, but they've been able to shift their wood and keep running. But I think this is a good time with prices down around $1,000 for everything to load up for cover your needs through May, and then look for a little, just some more volatility back and forth in June, July, and August, and keep playing the game.
I mean, look at these numbers. Any mill should be producing as much lumber as they possibly can with as many human beings as they possibly can.
You can imagine, and they are.
Well, I mean, look at when you have in some regions, especially in the South, how many X above the cost of production. This is when you cut a fat hog, right? This is when you make money. And let's not forget, it's taken a while, but there's a lot more pine mills coming on in the next 6 months, right? And they will be coming on, and I think people figure out how to get their capacity up and going. But Jean-Marc was saying, did I say that, Jean-Marc?
Jean-Marc Prudhomme, yeah.
And I'm not sure what is Jean-Marc, was he talking plywood or OSB here, or both? When he says in 10 years, the plywood inventory.
No, he's in Eastern Canada, so probably plywood.
Okay, 10 years, the plywood industry. Inventory distributors and lumberyards has never been so low to start the season out in May. Too low for the month of May through July. Yeah, I good. Okay, I take your word for it because I never track that. And maybe up. What I did notice, I was very surprised over the last. Oh, thank you, plywood. Over the last 4 months, how more people weren't switching to plywood. It seems like 2 weeks ago when sturdy floor plywood and all that dropped, so far below OSB, it finally pulled some people in, right? Especially some multifamily people started buying some plywood because it was $200 or $300 1,000 cheaper, right? I guess maybe we'll see that continue, but I mean, plywood historically always has certain pockets it trades in and certain pockets it doesn't, I think.
I'd be interested from the people that are just here right now. I don't know how many there are, but those of you guys that are in the retail sector, contractor yard, was were your March sales lower than your March sales lower than your January and February sales? Were you worried did it look like it was peeling back a little bit? Because
let's see if somebody says anything. So basically, were your March sales lower than Jan and Feb? We'll see on the delay how long that takes for some people to come back. What's your intuition on that one?
My intuition is that it was lower, and that's causing people to be apprehensive right now, because they think if it was worse in March than it was in January and February, then we're going the wrong way.
March was our biggest month in history.
Well, thanks, P.
Yeah. There you go. That's good feedback.
That's right. I put that theory to bed.
There's another one. Our March was well above.
These are all my guys. They hadn't told me that.
March sales were higher than January and February. Cleveland Lumber.
All right, 0 for 3.
This is the good stuff that you see on a show, right?
Yeah, and here's what's important about that. Like March sales were better than January and February. The January and February we're doing
here they come. We do
relatively okay, but
yeah.
Everybody's doing better, but did you look and see like the implication for that is going to be that inventories are being reduced, that inventories are being liquidated because the market's not being bought at a pace that we're March. Look at everybody's saying the same thing.
Well, that's interesting though. What Joe said, Yoder, March sales up, piece count down, right? Because if you're talking dollar sales or volume sales,
right? Yeah,
right. So dollar sales, it makes sense on, right? March better than Jan and February at 150% over last. March mill sales crushed January and February. And so, Matt, there's your sentiment explained.
Well, here's what's interesting. You guys are all contractor yards, kind of 2, 3, 4 locations. John Mark Prudhomme's got several hundred, I think. But the Lowe's and Home Depot were the home centers were the places that were not doing as well. And the people that were selling to the home centers, like the treaters and their white lumber VMI program people, were they were getting the word like, well, let's just see how it's going to go. So that's interesting that the independent contractor is doing better than the home centers are doing.
No, it's a good question. Jim brought it up too here. Was it board footage up or simply gross sales dollars up, right?
Right. Yeah, Joe touched on that, but everybody else was kind of.
It costs just as much to haul a 2x4 at $10 as it does at $40 per piece count. Piece count is great, but money in the till is better. Interesting.
They're making bigger profits on smaller volumes.
Right. Right. So that's the best feedback we've got on a question, Matt. We got to work that in a little bit better next time. That's a good deal.
Thank you guys for answering too. It didn't cost you anything. You didn't divulge anything, and you learned a lot about what everybody else was doing too.
Yeah, that's good. Lumberyards are selling approximately the quantity and volume from 2019 right now.
Pre-COVID.
Well, so maybe that goes back to the theory is that we're stuck between 1.2 and 1.3 as far as completions, right, Matt? Or as far as okay.
Good stuff, guys.
Very good, very good. Well, listen, everybody, I appreciate it. Thanks for signing in, and a lot of the people, Matt, that are on here that are your people that you brought over to the platform that are now actively buying lumber and selling lumber on here too. Thank you. One of the best compliments that we get at Materials Exchange, and I know Matt gets at Layman's Lumber Guide, is when you actually sign up for our platform or sign up for Layman's Lumber Guide. We love talking to you, but we really also like that we have products that we both make a living off of also. Matt's been in this forever, does a great job, has a great following. We're relatively new to the game, and we want you to be on our platform and use it to see price transparency and buy and sell lumber direct to your location. So you can register.
Well, don't sell you guys short. You guys they're new to the MX Exchange. These guys are hardly new to the industry. So you can trust what they do. They know what they're doing.
Well, I appreciate it, Matt. So everybody, loved having you. I mean, we're going to try to work in more feedback like we had last week. And thank you so much. Matt and I are on every noon Central Time on Thursdays. And again, come sign up at Matt's publication or at mxlumber.com. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you guys for participating.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
See ya.